The sun hung low above the dusty frontier town, turning the wooden buildings into long, silent shadows. People walked slowly toward the open square, boots crunching on the dry earth. It was auction day, the kind of day many dreaded, but still attended because frontier life allowed few choices. There would be tools, old furniture, and maybe a few animals sold, but everyone already knew the real reason the crowd gathered early. Everyone whispered the same name, the same rumor, the same uncomfortable truth. The last Apache woman captured months ago was going to be put up for sale. Her name was Naya, though no one in town cared to learn it. She stood barefoot on a short wooden platform near the sheriff's post. Her wrists were not chained, but the unspoken force around her was stronger than metal. She held herself straight, her chin lifted just enough to show she would not bow to fear. Her long black hair, dusty from travel, fell over her shoulders. Her dress was simple and worn, not hers originally but given by the sheriff's wife when she was brought into town. She did not speak, did not look away. Even when people stared with curiosity, they tried to hide. Most townsfolk looked at her with nervous eyes. They were unsure what to think, unsure what was right or wrong, unsure how to treat the situation without getting involved. A few whispered stories about raids and danger, although none of them had ever spoken to her or knew anything about her past. Others avoided looking at her completely. Frontier life hardened people, but even hardened people felt something uneasy today. It was not normal to see a human being standing on a platform like an item. The sheriff cleared his throat and stepped forward. He was not a cruel man, but he followed the rules set by the judge in the nearest city. He kept glancing down, unable to meet Naya's eyes for long. He felt something like guilt stirring in him, though he would never admit it aloud. "Folks," he said loudly, forcing confidence into his voice, "this here is a legal auction approved by the court. The woman was captured during the summer raid. The funds raised will support town security and supplies." His words floated into the hot air, but no one cheered. Even the horses tied nearby seemed restless. The sheriff called for attention again, lifting a small card. "We'll start with $6 silver." A hush fell. The price was low. That was the first thing everyone noticed. But the truth was simple. Nobody wanted the responsibility. Having her would mean trouble, danger, or at least endless questions about how to treat her, who she belonged to, and whether she should stay in town. A few ranchers shook their heads. A pair of merchants whispered about the cost of feeding an extra mouth. Old women crossed their arms, their eyes full of uncertainty. No one dared raise a hand. At the very edge of the crowd, leaning quietly against a weathered post, stood Elias Ward. Most people had barely noticed him since he arrived in town 2 days earlier. He was a traveler, thin but strong, with a calm face that looked older than his age. His clothing was dusty from the road, and his hat-shaded eyes that carried a weight no one understood. He kept to himself, never spoke unless spoken to, and spent most of his time sitting alone near the old hotel porch. Some said he was running from something. Others guessed he had lost someone. Elias had not planned on attending the auction. He had simply wandered into the square, drawn by the crowd's slow movement. When he saw Naya standing alone on that platform, something inside him stirred. He saw the calm in her eyes, the strength in her silence. She was not broken, though she had every reason to be. She reminded him of something he had forgotten long ago: courage. The sheriff tried again. $6 silver. Anyone? Still no one stepped forward. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Folks, she cannot remain in town under custody forever. Someone must take responsibility." Elias took one quiet step forward. No one noticed at first, then another. The dust floated around his boots as he reached the front of the crowd. People turned, surprised and curious. The stranger? The quiet man who barely said a word? Was he really stepping up? Elias removed his hat politely. His voice was steady, simple, almost soft. "I'll pay." Every head turned. Someone whispered, "That man? Why him?" Another muttered, "He doesn't even know what he's getting into." The sheriff looked stunned. Elias Ward? Is that correct? You're sure about this? Yes, Elias answered. I'll pay the $6 silver. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside were the coins he had saved from months of wandering between towns, doing odd jobs and whatever work he could find. He placed the money in the sheriff's hand without hesitation. Elias did not touch Naya. He did not force her to step down from the platform. Instead, he simply looked at her with calm eyes. Not demanding anything, Naya stared back at him, studying him carefully. Her expression unreadable. She expected control, commands, or some claim over her freedom. Instead, he took 2 steps back and gave her space. You're free to walk with me if you want, he said quietly. I won't force you. The words fell like a stone dropped into a silent lake. Gentle, unexpected, impossible for some to understand. Naya blinked, surprised. Freedom was not a word she expected to hear. Her mind raced. Was this a trick? Was this man pretending to be kind? She watched him carefully, waiting for some sign of hidden intent, but Elias only stood calmly, giving her time. No pressure, no demand. She slowly stepped off the platform. The boards creaked under her feet. She walked past the sheriff, past the crowd that still watched in stunned silence. Elias turned, walking toward the dirt road that led out of town. After a moment, Naya followed him not because she had to, but because he had offered her something no one else had. Choice. The crowd parted as they passed. Some stared with confusion, others with judgment, but a few watched with quiet respect. They saw something different in that moment, something rare in the frontier, a silent act of kindness carried out by a man who hardly spoke. They walked side by side at a careful distance. Elias did not speak unless Naya looked at him first. The world around them stretched into open land, dry grass whispering in the breeze, mountains standing far away like old guards watching over everything. As they moved farther from town, Naya looked back once. The platform was still there, but she no longer stood on it. The sky was wide above them, endless and open. Elias offered her a canteen of water. She hesitated again, then accepted with careful hands. Thank you, she said softly. The first word she had spoken to him. You're welcome, he replied, just as quietly. They continued walking, 2 strangers connected by a moment neither of them had planned for. Elias did not know where this road would take them. Naya did not know if she could trust him fully, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the faint spark of hope, small but steady, like a fire just beginning to form from cold ashes. Behind them, the town slowly returned to normal life. But something felt different, because that day, $6 bought not ownership, not control, but a chance for freedom. Freedom for a woman who deserved to choose her own path, and maybe a chance for a broken man to find his own purpose again. And as the dust lifted gently around their steps, their journey had only just begun. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of dirt winding between hills and dry grass. Elias walked steadily, letting Naya choose her pace. She moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the horizon, ears alert to every sound. She had been forced to travel under control for so long that freedom felt strange, almost frightening, but Elias did not rush her. He offered no commands, no pressure, only space, and the quiet presence of someone who would not harm her. That alone was a kind of comfort she had not felt in months. The wind carried the faint smell of sagebrush and sun-baked earth. Birds called in the distance, their songs unfamiliar to Naya, but soothing. Elias carried a small bundle of supplies over his shoulder, bread, dried meat, and a canteen of water, but he did not speak unless necessary. His quiet manner made him almost invisible, yet she noticed everything about him. The careful way he walked, the kindness in his eyes, the patience in his gestures. She had learned long ago to read people quickly, to judge whether someone's intentions were true. Something about him felt real. After several hours, they stopped near a small creek. The water was clear and cool, trickling over smooth stones. Elias knelt to drink, cupping his hands. Naya watched silently from the edge. She wanted to drink but hesitated. Trust was not easy for her, especially after months of being treated like property. She had been sold, traded, and abandoned. People's words and promises had no meaning anymore. Elias looked up and noticed her. He held the canteen out toward her. "It's safe," he said softly. "Take your time." Naya studied him, then stepped closer. She took the canteen and drank slowly. The cold water was a relief, washing away some of the dust and weariness. She felt a small spark of trust growing inside her. She returned the canteen with a nod. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice steady but gentle. Elias smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me." For a long time, they sat in silence, listening to the water and the wind. The quiet was not empty. It was a space where words were not needed yet. Naya had learned the hard way that silence could be dangerous when people wanted to control you. But with Elias, silence felt safe. After a while, Naya spoke again. "I was taken from my home, my people." Her voice broke slightly, but she stopped herself before tears came. She did not want to appear weak, not in front of him. Elias nodded, listening without interruption. "I can only imagine," he said softly. "I lost people I cared about, too." He looked down at his hands, rough and calloused from years of work and wandering. "I don't talk about it much, because it doesn't change anything. But I understand loss." Naya glanced at him, surprised. No one had ever shared their pain like that without expecting something in return. He had lost people, yet he still offered her kindness. That was rare in a world that had taught her to expect cruelty. They walked again, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Horses grazed in the distance, and the occasional ranch cabin appeared along the horizon, abandoned or silent. Naya noticed how Elias watched the land, alert to danger, yet never rushing or panicking. He moved with careful awareness, but never with fear. She began to feel safe for the first time in months. After another few hours, they reached a small clearing where the grass was taller and softer. Elias knelt to examine their surroundings. Naya watched him, curious. "Why are you so careful?" she asked. He looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed a small, almost shy smile. "Because the world is full of people who want to hurt others, and because I don't want to lose anyone else." Not again. Naya thought about that for a moment. She had lost so many already: her family, her freedom, her home. But here was someone who understood loss, who did not judge her for what had happened. She felt a strange connection forming, something she had not experienced in a long time. Trust. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Elias set up a small campfire. Naya watched from a short distance, unsure if she should help. He noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to do anything," he said gently. "You can just rest. We'll eat soon." She hesitated, then gathered some dry branches and kindling, moving slowly. Elias watched her carefully, offering guidance when needed, but letting her work. They built the fire together, side by side but without pressure. The flames sparked and grew, warm against the cool evening air. Naya stirred the pot of stew slowly, glancing at Elias occasionally. "I didn't expect," she began, then paused. "I didn't expect anyone to help me like this." Elias shrugged slightly. "People can surprise you, and sometimes, the ones who need help the most are the ones no one expects to care." He looked into the fire, silent for a moment. "I've seen enough pain to know when it's worth standing by someone." The words struck Naya in a way she could not explain. No one had ever said anything like that to her. People had treated her as property, as a problem, as something to be bought and sold. But he treated her like a human being. After the meal, they sat by the fire, letting the stars appear one by one. Naya's mind wandered to her home, the Apache lands she had lost. She missed the mountains, the rivers, the voices of her people. But for the first time, she also felt a small hope. Maybe she could survive. Maybe she could live again. Elias noticed her gaze. "You'll see your people again," he said quietly. "I'll take you as far as you want to go. You don't have to go back to town. To anyone who thinks they can own you, you're free." Naya looked at him, and for the first time, her guarded expression softened. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Elias sighed, a small, tired sound. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know what it's like to find something worth protecting. I don't know how to explain it. But you deserve better than what you've had. And maybe I do too." The night grew darker, but the fire kept them warm. She felt safe sitting near him. She could breathe without flinching, could eat without fear, could simply exist without expecting pain. It was strange and wonderful. Over the next few days, they continued traveling. They shared little stories about the roads they had walked, the people they had met, the dangers they had faced. Naya learned how to ride again, her body remembering the movements it had almost forgotten. Elias taught her to recognize tracks in the dirt, to notice signs of animals and weather, to survive on the land without depending on towns. During one evening, as the sun painted the sky in red and gold, Naya paused on a hill and looked at Elias. I've never trusted anyone like this before," she admitted softly. Elias smiled faintly. "And I've never had someone trust me like that. Maybe we're learning from each other." The words made Naya smile, a small but genuine smile. It felt good to smile again. She had almost forgotten how, yet even as they found comfort in each other's presence, danger was never far behind. Naya had been sold, and there were still people in town who believed she was theirs. Rumors traveled faster than truth, and a small group had already mounted horses, determined to reclaim her. Naya did not know this yet, but Elias did. He had noticed strange tracks in the dust, signs that someone was following them. When he finally spoke about it, he did not show fear. "There are people behind us," he said calmly. "We need to keep moving, and be careful. They won't give up easily." Naya looked at him, a flicker of worry crossing her face. "Should I fight?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Not yet. We use our heads first. We survive. And then we face what comes." Naya nodded, understanding. She realized that for the first time in months, she was not alone. She had someone who would stand by her, someone who did not expect anything in return, someone who respected her choices. The road ahead was long, the nights cold, and the dangers real. But as they walked together, side by side, the burdens they carried seemed lighter. Elias had freed her from chains. But in the quiet, the small gestures, and the shared journey, he was giving her something more. The chance to trust again. The chance to hope, and the chance to survive not as a captive, but as a person. And as the sun dipped behind the hills on their second day of travel, Naya realized that this stranger, this quiet, broken man, might not only save her life but also change it in ways she could not yet understand. The sun had barely risen when Elias noticed fresh tracks in the dirt. He crouched down, touched the collapsed edges of the hoof prints, and felt the dry soil between his fingers. "They were here sometime last night," he said quietly. Naya watched him with steady eyes, her breath calm even though she sensed worry in his voice. She kneeled beside him. "How many?" "4 riders," Elias answered. "Maybe 5. They were moving fast." Naya's hands tightened at her sides. She understood what this meant. People from the town were following them, not ready to let her go. She looked toward the far hills, feeling that old ache in her chest, the one she felt every time freedom slipped through her fingers. But Elias stood up, brushing dust from his palms. "We're not stopping," he said gently. "And we're not turning back." He looked at her with quiet certainty. "I won't let them take you." "Not again." Naya studied him a moment, then nodded. She trusted his judgment, even when danger approached. Together, they packed their small camp quickly and walked into the rising morning light. Elias adjusted his hat against the sun, and Naya wrapped her shawl tighter, preparing for whatever lay ahead. The land around them grew rougher as they traveled rocky paths, thickets of dry shrubs, and narrow ridges that made it hard for horses to pass. Elias chose the path carefully, hoping to slow the riders behind them. Every sound felt louder in the open space, every gust of wind making Naya turn her head just to check. By noon, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a storm. The wind carried a bite, swirling dust around their legs. Naya sensed this weather could work in their favor, giving them cover. But the shifting air also carried faint, distant echoes. Horses, voices, and the unmistakable sound of pursuit. Elias tightened his grip on the small pack over his shoulder. "They're closer than I hoped," he murmured. "We need shelter." They moved faster, heading toward a broken line of old homesteads long forgotten by the frontier. Some still had collapsed walls and sagging roofs, but one stood slightly firmer than the rest. When they reached it, Elias inspected the structure. Its wooden frame groaned in the wind, but it would hold for a little while. "This will do," he said. "We can rest for a short moment and plan." They stepped inside. The air smelled of dust, dry wood, and memories of a family long gone. A few rusty tools lay on the floor. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls, painting thin golden lines across the room. Naya moved quietly, checking corners and windows. "They will reach us soon," she said softly. Her voice wasn't fearful, only honest. Elias nodded. "I know." She watched him as he examined the layout of the homestead, calculating how best to protect them. She could see the weight in his shoulders, the heaviness from years of carrying pain alone. Yet today, he carried something new. Purpose. "You shouldn't fight for me," Naya said gently, stepping closer. "They want me, not you. If I go back, they will leave you alone." Elias turned sharply, meeting her eyes. "I will not let them take you. Not while I'm breathing." His voice was firm but calm. "You didn't ask for any of this. You deserve your freedom, and I won't let anyone steal that from you." Naya looked at him with soft eyes. "But why do you care so much? You don't know me." Elias looked away for a moment, out the broken window toward the distant riders. "I know enough," he said. "I know what it feels like to lose everything. And I won't watch it happen to someone else if I can stop it." His voice lowered. "I couldn't save my family, but maybe I can save you." The honesty in his words touched something deep inside her. She placed a hand lightly on his arm, a gesture of quiet gratitude. "We face them together," she said. Their moment broke when a loud, sharp sound echoed through the dry air, a distant shout carried by the wind. Naya stiffened. Elias stepped back from the window. The riders had reached the edge of the old homestead field. They were close enough to see the figures on horseback, silhouettes against the storm-darkened sky. "We need to move," Elias whispered. He guided Naya through the narrow hall to the back of the building. They exited quietly, stepping into tall grass that swayed wildly in the wind. The storm clouds rolled closer, darkening the world with each passing minute. But as they tried to circle around the riders, a sharp voice called out from behind them. "You there! Stop!" Naya froze. Elias turned slowly. The men from the town sat on their horses, glaring with anger and determination. One of them pointed a finger. "That woman belongs to the town. You took her." Elias kept his voice steady. "No. I paid for her release. She walks by. Her own choice." The leader shook his head. "Doesn't matter. She was never meant to go free. Hand her over." Naya stepped forward, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes strong and clear. "I am not something to hand over," she said calmly. "You have no right to control me." The men looked surprised by her voice, by her courage, by the strength she carried even in the middle of danger. But their surprise quickly turned into stubbornness. "She doesn't get to decide," one muttered. "Rules are rules." Elias stepped in front of Naya. "She decides now." The men stiffened, insulted that a stranger dared challenge them. Storm winds roared through the grass, lightning flickering far away. It felt like the world held its breath. The leader signaled his men. "Take her." The riders tried to advance, but Elias guided Naya toward the rocks behind them. Naya moved quickly, using her knowledge of the land to find narrow paths the horses couldn't access. The riders grew frustrated, shouting as the storm intensified. Rain began to fall in sharp droplets, turning the dirt into mud. Elias and Naya ducked between boulders as the riders dismounted, trying to chase on foot. The storm became their shield, thunder shaking the sky. Naya guided Elias through the terrain with surprising skill, her familiarity with rough land becoming their greatest advantage. At one point, Elias slipped in the mud. Naya grabbed his arm, pulling him up with steady strength. "I won't leave you," she said. They continued deeper into the rocky hillside. The riders grew tired, slipping and stumbling, unable to match their agility. The wind roared louder, rain falling in sheets. The men shouted angrily but slowly gave up, realizing they could not chase safely in the storm. Finally, when the riders retreated toward the field, Elias and Naya paused beneath a sheltered overhang. They were soaked, breathing hard, their clothes clinging to their skin. The storm crackled above them, but they were safe for now. Elias slumped against the rock, closing his eyes in exhaustion. Naya knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, though his breathing was heavy. "Just tired," he said with a small smile. "You saved us back there." Naya shook her head. "No. We saved each other." They stayed under the overhang until the rain softened into a gentle drizzle. The riders had long disappeared into the distance. The land around them glistened with fresh water, the storm washing away tracks and traces. Elias opened his eyes and looked at Naya with deep gratitude. "You were brave," he whispered. Naya smiled softly, a warm and rare smile. "I learned from you." For a long moment, they sat in silence, breathing in the fresh, cool air after the storm. The danger had passed for now, but something else had grown strong between them. Trust that could no longer be denied. They did not know what awaited them next, but they knew one thing with certainty. They were no longer two strangers walking the same road. They were partners in survival, connected by courage, loyalty, and the promise of freedom neither would let go of. And with the storm fading behind them, the road ahead felt a little less lonely. The storm had washed the earth clean, leaving drops of water hanging from grass blades like tiny pieces of glass. Elias and Naya stepped out from the rocky shelter after the clouds drifted away. The air felt cool and fresh, carrying the soft smell of wet soil. It was a peaceful morning, almost too peaceful compared to the danger they had lived through the night before. Naya walked a few steps ahead, scanning the land carefully. She was quiet, but Elias sensed something different in her hope. A quiet, trembling hope she had kept buried for months. Her eyes followed the distant mountains, their shadows sharp against the rising sun. "We're getting closer," she said softly. Elias caught up to her. "Closer to what?" She took a deep breath. "My people. My home." She pointed toward the mountains. If any of them survived, they would be somewhere beyond those ridges. Elias nodded. He had seen that look in her eyes before, the look of someone searching for something precious. It reminded him of his own past, the long journey he had taken after losing his family. But the difference was clear. She still had a chance to find what she lost. They walked together through open fields that slowly shifted into rugged paths. Naya moved with confidence now. Her steps were lighter, her posture higher. The fear that weighed her down in the past was no longer the only thing inside her. Freedom had started to change her from within. Elias felt the change too. The more he watched her, the more he understood that freeing her had also freed something inside himself. For the first time in years, he felt like he was walking toward something meaningful, instead of away from everything painful. By noon, they reached a dry riverbed that ran between two cliffs. Naya stopped suddenly and crouched down. Elias looked over her shoulder. In the soft mud near a patch of shade, there were footprints, small ones, almost like children's. Naya touched the prints gently. "These are not from the riders," she whispered. "These are from my people. Fresh ones." Elias felt a warm wave of relief. "So they're alive," she nodded, eyes glistening with emotion. "Some of them, at least." They followed the prince along the riverbed. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with shared purpose. Birds soared overhead, and small animals darted among the rocks. The world felt alive again, full of signs that life continued despite everything. For hours, they followed the trail until it led up a steep hill. At the top, Naya froze. Elias stopped beside her, breathing heavily from the climb. Below the hill, smoke rose into the sky, thin, steady, and familiar. Naya recognized it instantly. It was the kind of smoke her people used, controlled, safe, and meant to signal presence rather than danger. Her hand flew to her chest. "It's them," she whispered. Elias watched her eyes fill with tears, tears of joy, fear, and disbelief all at once. He had never seen her this emotional, not even during the storm. Her entire body softened, as if she had finally found the path she had dreamed of since the day she was taken. "Go," Elias said gently. Naya hesitated, turning to look at him. "Will you come with me?" He nodded once, his voice quiet. "If you want me to." Her answer was a soft, grateful smile. They descended the hill slowly, approaching the camp carefully so they wouldn't startle anyone. When they reached the edge of the camp, a small child spotted them and froze. His eyes widened at the sight of Naya. Then he turned and shouted something in their language before running deeper into the camp. Moments later, 2 elders and several women stepped out. Their eyes fell on Naya, and everything stopped. The air felt still, as if the world itself had paused for this moment. The oldest woman stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Naya?" she whispered. Naya's breath caught. "Mother?" she said so softly it was almost a breath. The elder woman rushed forward, wrapping Naya in her arms. Tears overflowed as mother and daughter held each other tightly, trembling with relief. The other members of the tribe surrounded them, touching Naya's arms and shoulders, whispering her name in disbelief. Elias stepped back respectfully, giving them space. He watched the reunion with a bittersweet ache in his chest. Seeing Naya reunited with her people filled him with joy. Yet a quiet sadness crept into him. This was her world, her family, her place. He had only been a traveler passing through her story. The tribe members eventually noticed him. Some looked cautious, others curious. Naya wiped her tears and turned to introduce him. "This man saved me," she said with deep emotion. "He protected me when no one else would." The elders studied Elias carefully. They did not speak his language fluently, but the gratitude in their eyes was unmistakable. They bowed their heads to him, a gesture of respect that filled him with quiet humility. The tribe invited him to sit, offering food and water. Elias accepted politely, though he felt like an outsider. He watched as children hugged Naya, as women touched her hands and hair, as men nodded in respect at her return. She belonged here. It was obvious. As the sun began to set, Elias quietly gathered his small pack. Naya noticed immediately. "You're leaving?" she asked, sadness in her voice. He hesitated. "You're home now," he said softly. "You don't need me anymore. And I don't belong here." Naya stepped closer, searching his face. "You helped me when everyone else looked away. You walked through storms and danger for me. Why would you leave now?" Elias looked down, his voice low. "Because I don't want to get in the way of your life. This is where you're meant to be. I was just someone passing by. Someone who tried to do the right thing." Naya shook her head firmly. "You are not just someone. You gave me my freedom. You gave me hope again. My people see that. I see that." He looked away, fighting old memories that still haunted him. "I don't know how to belong anywhere anymore." Naya reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. "Then let me teach you," she said quietly. "You brought me home. Let us help you find a home too." Elias looked into her eyes. The sincerity in them was deep and real. He felt something warm grow in his chest, a feeling he had not felt in years. Before he could answer, the elder woman approached and nodded. She pointed to the empty space near the fire, a silent invitation. Elias understood. They were offering him a place, not out of duty, but from genuine acceptance. Naya smiled softly. "Stay for tonight," she said. "Tomorrow, you can choose again. Freedom belongs to you too." Elias slowly nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Tonight then, as the stars filled the sky and the campfire glowed warm and bright, Naya sat beside him, not as a rescued stranger, but as someone who cared deeply for the man who had walked through danger to return her to her people. And for the first time in many years, Elias felt like he wasn't walking alone anymore. The morning sun rose gently over the Apache camp, painting the ground in warm gold. The air felt fresh, filled with soft smoke from the early cooking fires. Children moved between the tents with sleepy smiles. Women prepared food, and the men checked the edges of the camp for safety. Everything felt alive, peaceful, and familiar, at least for Naya. But for Elias, it was still a world he did not fully understand. He woke before sunrise, unable to rest. Something inside him still carried the old habit of leaving before anyone else noticed him. Years of wandering had trained him to expect nothing from anyone. He sat near the ashes of the night fire, holding his hat in his hands, staring at the horizon where the sky changed colors slowly. He did not want to disturb the tribe. He did not want to draw attention. He simply needed to think. Last night had been warm, gentle, and full of quiet joy. Naya had stayed near him, sharing stories with her people about her childhood, the days before she was taken, and the memories she thought she would never have again. She had laughed a sound he hadn't heard from her before, and the camp had joined her, happy to welcome her home. Elias had felt something inside him soften. But as the fire died and people went to sleep, he had felt something else too. The old, familiar weight of not belonging. Naya woke and stepped out of her family's shelter just as Elias stood up to leave. She saw him tighten the strap on his small pack. She saw the way he looked at the path leading away from the camp, and fear rushed through her, not fear for her safety, but fear of losing someone important again. "Elias," she called softly. He turned, surprised but calm. "Morning," he said. She walked toward him slowly, studying his face. "You're planning to leave," she said. Not as a question, but as a truth she already knew. He looked away, unable to hold her eyes. "I thought it would be easier if I left early," he said quietly. "You have your family now, your people. You don't need me here." Naya shook her head, stepping closer. "And what about you? Where will you go?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Somewhere far. That's what I've always done." She could see the loneliness in his eyes, the old sorrow that never really left him. She remembered how he spoke of loss, how he carried memories like heavy stones on his back. She had learned long ago that people who looked calm on the outside often carried storms inside. "You helped me find my home," she said softly. "But your heart is still wandering." Elias gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe wandering is all I'm meant for." "Elias." Naya reached out and touched his arm gently. The simple touch made him freeze. "You don't have to wander anymore," she said. "Not unless you choose to." He hesitated, unsure what to say. One of the elders approached them slowly. His steps were steady, and his eyes warm with understanding. He spoke in his own language first, then repeated his words in English so Elias could hear. "You brought our daughter home," the elder said. "That is a gift we will never forget. A man who brings light into someone's life should not walk away into darkness again." Elias felt the words sink deeply into him. He bowed his head respectfully. Unable to speak, the elder placed a hand over his heart. "You are welcome here. You have a place among us, if that is what you want." Naya watched Elias carefully. She could see the struggle within him, the fear of staying, the fear of belonging, the fear of losing again. But she also saw something new. The desire to rest, to breathe, to stop running. She stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "You once told me you couldn't save your family," she said. "But you saved me. And in doing that, you saved a piece of yourself too." Elias closed his eyes. Her words struck a part of him he had buried for years. He remembered the days after losing his family, the endless road, the silence, the feeling that nothing mattered anymore. He remembered wandering from town to town because staying in one place hurt too much. He remembered looking at the world like it was too big and he was too small. But with Naya, he had found a reason to fight again. A reason to wake up and walk forward. A reason to hope. He opened his eyes slowly. Naya stood before him, her dark hair blowing softly in the morning breeze. Her eyes warm. Waiting, not forcing. Not demanding. Just waiting. "You don't owe me anything," she said gently. "But if you want to stay, we will welcome you. As a friend. As someone who matters." She paused. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Elias looked at the path behind her, the camp filled with life and warmth. Then he looked at the path ahead of him. Empty. Endless. Lonely. He had walked that empty path for so long that he barely remembered what it felt like to stay in one place. He took a slow breath. "I don't know if I can be what your people need," he said quietly. Naya shook her head. "They don't need you to be anything except who you are." She stepped even closer, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want you to go." Elias felt his chest tighten. He had heard many words in his lifetime: commands, warnings, insults, empty promises, but he hadn't heard anything like that in years. He felt warmth spread through him, pushing away the coldness he had carried for so long. He looked directly into her eyes. "And if I stay, will I belong?" Naya smiled, a gentle, tender smile that held truth. "You already do." The wind grew still. The camp seemed to pause. Even the birds overhead quieted as Elias slowly loosened the strap on his pack, letting it fall to the ground. He took one small step forward toward her, toward the camp, toward a life where he didn't have to run anymore. Naya's eyes softened with relief. The elder nodded with approval and stepped back, letting them speak with their hearts instead of words. Elias exhaled. "Then I'll stay," he said softly. "If you'll have me." Naya's smile widened, filled with gratitude and warmth. "We will." She took his hand, not as someone who owed him anything, not as someone who was rescued, but as someone who saw him as a person deserving of kindness, peace, and a place to call home. Together, they walked back into the camp. The children ran around them, laughing. The women offered bread and warm tea. The men greeted him with respectful nods. He was no longer an outsider. He was someone they accepted, someone who mattered. And as Elias sat beside Naya near the morning fire, he felt the weight inside him finally begin to lift. He had given her freedom, but she had given him something just as powerful: belonging. The road behind him was long and filled with sorrow, but the road ahead, this road was filled with hope. And for the first time in many years, Elias Ward felt truly alive.